Hey guys, welcome back to True Crime with Shannon, where I cover missing persons, unsolved cases, crime news, and more. Alright, so we're getting into the next update in the Thomas Valva murder trial of his awful father, Michael Valva. I've got us up to today on this post, and today is actually when the prosecution rested, and there's some other breaking news I will cover before I end the video. But before we get into today's video topic, I always like to feature a missing persons poster on the channel, so let me pull up today's missing persons poster. Okay, today's missing person is going to be Michael Monkey Vaughan. Yes, I've posted about him on the channel numerous times, but because I have such great new subscribers and viewers because of this trial of little Tommy, I wanted to make sure that you guys got to see little Monkey's face as well. Now, this is one of the older posters, but it's one of my favorite posters of little Monkey because you get to see all his little personality in this poster, and there's also other information that I can get to you guys. But my biggest thing is I wanted to get his face out there, so I wanted to get that out to you guys because this little guy has been missing for over a year. He's been missing since July of 2021 in Idaho, out of Fruitland, Idaho. Again, he just turned 6 years old. His last weight was 50 pounds. He's got blonde hair and blue eyes. Again, last seen in July of 2021. His name is his name is Michael Vaughan, but he's known as Monkey, according to his mom and his family, because he's always had that personality. And he's just really a boy's boy. He loves trucks and all that sort of stuff. So if you have any information on Michael Monkey Vaughan, and I refer to him all the time as Little Monkey, because once you get to know this guy, he really has become, very endearing to a lot of us here on YouTube. Please contact the Fruitland Police Department. Their phone number is 208-642-6006. Any tip you give can be anonymous, and again, you can always call 911. There is a reward of $50,000. I believe it's much higher now. I'm going to update when I do the editing on this with the current information on the reward. But again, if you have any information on this little 6-year-old, please contact the authorities. I know his mama and his daddy and his siblings really want to see Michael back home as soon as possible. Okay, so we're kind of getting, like I said, we're not too far off. This was basically, it's just from like Tuesday to today, which is Thursday as I record this. The lead detective has been still back on the stand, and there was the medical examiner also on the stand. The reason we heard from the housekeeper, by the way, that was a defense witness. That we heard from her because of her scheduling conflicts. So even though this was still the prosecution's witnesses, she came in because of her time constraints. So we are still on the prosecution witnesses up until today when the prosecution rested, and the defense is supposed to take over tomorrow. Again, we're talking about the lead detective on the case, Detective Flores. When I ended the interview, I remember he did cry and put his hand to his face, said Suffolk Police Sergeant Norberto Flores from the witness stand in court. Again, this is taking place in Long Island, Riverhead, Suffolk County. Valva's lead defense attorney, John Loturco, during his cross-examination of Flores, attempted to present a narrative of Valva as a loving father who cooperated with this initial police investigation, which is very different to the allegations painted by several prosecution witnesses of an abusive father who lied to investigators and first responders about how Thomas got some of his injuries the day of his death. So again, he told at least 2 different stories at this point. He may have told more, but I know he told that he fell as he was running to the bus, and he told other different stories. So as far as I'm concerned, Michael Valva, he is not reliable whatsoever. All right, let me pull up the next slide on this one. All right. Flores said he interviewed Valva in a family room at the Long Island Community Hospital in Patchogue about 11:28 a.m. Thomas had been pronounced deceased in a nearby hospital trauma room exactly an hour earlier at 10:28 a.m. Flores said Valva agreed to speak to him and was not read his Miranda rights because at that time he was not a suspect and the investigation was non-criminal. Valva was matter of fact as he recited the details of what he said happened to Thomas that morning. That Thomas fell on the concrete driveway while running to the school bus, which prosecutors say is not the truth. I don't believe it for a hot second either. He did not fall running to the bus. All right, let me pull up the next slide. Valva, during that police interview, told Flores that Thomas's soiled clothing from that morning could be found on the back patio of the home in a plastic bag. Flores testified he voiced no objection to having the officers at his home while he was at the hospital. So he didn't object to them going into his house to get this particular evidence, or anything like that. Correct, Flores responded. Despite Valva's tears during the police interview, he later texted an NYPD chaplain and someone else about other matters, Flores testified. Michael Valva asked Father Franco, the chaplain, if he could help him get a transfer to the property section in Queens, said Flores when questioned on redirect by lead prosecutor Carrie Ann Kelly. And he texted someone else. Links to YouTube videos, Flores said. I believe they were video game links, he said. That's odd. Your son just died and you're worried about all this stuff? All right, let me pull up the next slide. Laturco also played the 911 call that Valva made the morning of Thomas's death, the third time it was played during the trial, and questioned Flores on why investigators did not make a transcript of the call, which a defense maintains is favorable evidence for Valva because it shows him trying to save his son's life. As we all know, he wasn't really trying to save his life. I think it was all like an act completely. The 911 call I felt was pretty easy to hear, Flores said. Prosecutors had provided the jury with transcripts for a video of the home's combination laundry room and pantry where the family dog Bella was held, which has served as key evidence for the prosecution because Valva, Paulino, and some of the children can be heard on the video discussing Thomas's condition in the hours leading up to his death. Flores said the video was sent to the FBI in an attempt to enhance the audio. Yeah, especially that background stuff. I know we all want to know what the heck they were saying. Laturco, while questioning Flores, pointed out a key piece of that video from about 9:40 a.m. to 10:51 a.m., which was during the time of Valva's nearly 7-minute 911 call, is missing. Laturco also questioned Flores about an alleged sexual relationship between Paulina and Edward Casilia, her cousin by marriage, who lived in the Center of Montreach home about 3 days a week in the 15 months leading up to Thomas's death. Concilio testified earlier in the trial that he was aware the boys slept in the garage, but he didn't confront Paulina about it because he was afraid of her wrath, which the defense has argued mirrors Valva's own fear of Paulina. So they're trying to use this as saying the cousin was living there and they may have had a very unfamily-like relationship going on there, and he was also afraid, so he didn't open his mouth and tell anyone about what was going on with these boys as well, because Paulina is scary, even to an NYPD cop. Flores, who had reviewed text messages on the encrypted WhatsApp application between Paulina and Concilio, said the pair had an inappropriate relationship when asked if the pair had a sexual relationship and were sexting, he basically seemed to agree with it. Bill Clinton-esque, Laturco asked Flores. So basically, they were having an affair of some sort, I guess, and it's not only bad enough that Paulina was fiancé to Valva, but this is her cousin. Ugh. The lengths that these two have gone to be sickening, not only to their children, but just in general, is mind-boggling. And like I said, I've heard some stories about Paulina from her former, some people who have known her. And we're going to be getting into that very soon. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of the detective's testimony. Let me pull up the ME. He was next up. The medical examiner, 8-year-old Thomas Valva's autopsy revealed he died of hypothermia and also suffered damage to multiple organs due to prolonged stress. The former Suffolk County medical examiner testified on Wednesday, October 26th. So he testified yesterday. In my opinion, the cause of Thomas Valva's death was hypothermia, testified Dr. Michael Kaplan. The doctor said his ruling of hypothermia as the cause of Thomas's death was consistent with a person sleeping in a garage and then being taken outside in cold weather and then sprayed with water. Dr. Michael Kaplan, now a deputy coroner in Ohio, testified that Thomas's thymus gland, which produces white blood cells called T cells that help build the immune system, was profoundly shrunken at the time of his death. Thomas's thymus weighed 9 grams at the autopsy, while the thymus of a healthy 8-year-old weighs 43 grams, he said. The organ is supposed to be fleshy, he said, but Thomas's was so thin, like a wafer. Wow. Another sad realization. So this is going to be all the autopsy information, and this is very, very vital to this case. Okay, let me pull up the next slide. Thomas's kidneys were also inflamed, a condition that could have been caused by his urine not being drained from his body, Kaplan said. Prosecutors have alleged both Thomas and Anthony were denied access to the bathroom and forced to wear pull-ups while living with Valva and Paulina. Thomas's stomach lining also had 5 or 6 dark brown spots clustered near the esophagus that are indicators of short-term stress, Kaplan said. Those spots, created by a combination of blood and gastric acid, are often caused by hypothermia or starvation, he said. I'm telling you guys, the more and more we hear of this evidence, it's really sickening. A little 8-year-old boy. This is what they're finding on his autopsy. The doctor added that Thomas's level of body fat was 3 millimeters, which is on the lower side of what I'd expect to see. And as a result, Thomas's ability to retain heat would be limited. Obviously, the skinnier you are, the less the less padding you've got. Because I know when I lost a lot of weight, I've been colder a lot. So obviously, if you're being starved and you're getting skinnier, you're not going to have a whole lot to keep your body warm. Kaplan testified that he began Thomas's autopsy on the day of Thomas's death with an external examination that revealed many scrapes and bruises. Under a microscope, Kaplan said, the wounds to his face revealed masses of red blood cells, including fresh injuries. Thomas Valva's head injuries did not contribute to his death, he said. So he didn't die from his head injuries. Where, remember, Michael was saying Michael and Paulina were talking on the audio that they heard at the trial, that he had 2 bumps on his head. That did not contribute to his death. What contributed to his death was being in that garage in 19 degrees without any blankets or anything, and his dad taking him outside and hosing him down with cold water. All right, let me pull up the next slide. Presented with a photograph of a smiling Thomas making a thumbs up sign with his right hand, Kaplan said Thomas's hand appeared a deep red to pink in color and said it certainly could be consistent with being exposed to a cold environment. Thomas allegedly face planted on concrete that morning and was a bloody expletive mess, according to audio of Valva speaking that morning that prosecutors had presented during the trial. Kaplan, under questioning from prosecutor Carrie Ann Kelly, confirmed that he did not agree that Thomas's scrapes were from a single fall, but rather multiple impacts on a hard surface. So obviously this kid has fallen multiple times. He's so cold, he keeps falling. He's got no probably sense of balance and everything. This poor kid. Standing in front of the jury box Wednesday, Kaplan displayed an autopsy photo of Thomas's face for the jury as he detailed the external injuries the boy suffered: scrapes and bruises on the midline and right side of his forehead, scrapes on the bridge, the folds and tip of his nose, as well as an abrasion inside of his mouth, a bruise inside his right cheek, bruising on his upper eyelid and on the inside of the inside of his right cheek, and on the mucous membrane on his lower jaw. Oh, how horrific. Can you imagine, 8 years old? The agony that poor Tommy had to deal with. The only good thing we can say to this whole thing is that he is out of this misery and he's up in heaven, you guys. And he saved his older brother and his little brother. All right, let me pull up the next slide. Kaplan said it was possible that Thomas's injuries to his cheek and the mucous membrane over his lower jaw could be caused by a slap on Thomas's cheek and putting a hand over the child's mouth, respectively. But asked on cross-examination by defense attorney Anthony LaPinta, Kaplan agreed that it was possible that the injury could have been caused by breathing tubes inserted at the hospital. So those one injuries. What about everything else? Kaplan said Thomas, who he described as having brown hair cut in a fade pattern, hazel eyes with long eyelashes, was thin at the time of his death and weighed 64 pounds and stood at 4 feet 2 inches, putting him in the 70th percentile among children his age in terms of weight and the 50th percentile for height. His body mass index, or BMI, was in the 80th to 84th percentile, Kaplan testified. In July 2019, according to medical records Kaplan received from a Valley Stream doctor who performed an annual physical examination on Thomas, he then stood at 50 inches and weighed 51 pounds. Wow. That is sad. All right, let me pull up the next slide. LaPinta also drew the jury's attention to Kaplan's autopsy findings that Thomas was well-developed and fairly nourished as an alternative to testimony from Thomas and Anthony's teachers that they appeared emancipated and were always hungry at school. However, the doctor also pointed out that Thomas's ribs and right hip bones were prominent. Yeah, if you're eating well, you're not going to see those ribs. I mean, that's just disgusting. His father and his future step monster did this horrible stuff to him and his brother. You didn't find that he was emancipated, right? LaPinta asked. That's correct, Kaplan said. LaPinta also attempted to call attention to the level of medical care Thomas received the morning of his death. Asked about possible medical treatments for hypothermia, Kaplan agreed a machine to oxygenate the blood can be used for hypothermic patients, as well as those in cardiac arrest. Thomas was in a cardiac arrest when he arrived at the hospital the morning of his death. Multiple medical officials have testified. The attending emergency room physician, Dr. Michael Volpe, testified earlier in the trial that the hospital didn't have such a machine that day. And also, they waited 50 minutes to call 911. So I believe that this poor kid had no chance whatsoever. How sad. All right, so let me get us... So this was up to yesterday, so let me pull up today's updates from Newsday. We can get on that. Okay, so this was breaking news. There was a previous article on Newsday when I saw it about an hour or so before I got off work that stated that the prosecution had rested. So now this is the current breaking news on Newsday. Valva trial. Judge refuses to dismiss murder charge against Michael Valva, accused of killing his son Thomas 8. So obviously they asked for this to be dismissed. As crazy as they are. All right, so let's see what the update here is. The Suffolk judge in Michael Valva's trial denied a defense request to dismiss a second-degree murder charge against the ex-NYPD officer accused in the death of his 8-year-old son after Suffolk prosecutors rested their case on Thursday morning. So apparently, when they rested today, defense is up, and they're like, "Hey, can we dismiss all these allegations?" Hell no. The jury was not present in a Riverhead courtroom when Valva defense attorney Sabito Capini argued that the prosecution had not presented legally sufficient evidence to support the charge that Valva acted with knowledge that there was a grave risk of serious injury or death. I ain't buying it. Of course, every defense team tries to save their client and go, "Hey, can we dismiss this case?" And they're like, "Heck no." Capini cited testimony from the teachers of Thomas and his older brother Anthony Tent, which he said was the most dramatic with respect to Anthony, and said the injuries they described, bruises and scrapes, were not life-threatening. That testimony did not support Valva acting with a state of mind of depraved indifference, which the jury must find in order to convict Valva of second-degree murder, he argued. Valva, 43, who has been on trial in Suffolk County Court for the last month, has pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder and child endangerment charges in the death of Thomas and the alleged abuse of Thomas and Anthony. Okay, so let me see here. Of course, Angela Polina, his ex-fiancée, we still don't have a date for her trial. Let's see. Okay. It was Angela Polina who conceived of, orchestrated, and implemented having the boy sleep in the garage, Capini said during the hearing seeking the charge dismissal, adding it was Valva who worked to undo Polina's alleged actions, as evidenced by multiple text messages detailing instances of Michael Valva's protesting Angela's treatment of the children. Come on, dude. Really? At the hearing, Capina said prosecutors have more than 340 video clips from the Nest camera system at the Valva Polina residence in evidence, as well as thick 6,000 pages of text messages. But he said the defense failed to show the jury all of the material, including video and text, showing the times when the boys slept in their upstairs bedroom. Angela Polina chastised Michael Valva for sneaking behind her back and letting him in the house, Capina argued. Lead prosecutor Carrie Ann Kelly opposed the motion and recounted video evidence that the jury saw of the boys sleeping on the bare garage floor and shivering. He saw it and knew it, and he was the father and did absolutely nothing to stop it, said Kelly, who turned toward Valva's direction as she spoke at a lectern mere feet from the defendant. Valva, seated at the defense table, did not return her gaze. Of course, he doesn't want to look at her. He knows she's telling the truth. Kelly then recounted audio evidence that the jury previously heard of Valva interacting with his son the morning of his death. Thomas was in the throes of dying, and all he could do was scream and yell at his child, Kelly said. Repeating Valva's words from that morning, as previously played for the jury, Kelly in a raised voice said, "Are you alive?" "Slap," the veteran prosecutor said loudly while clapping her hands together to make the slapping noise heard on the video, which prosecutors contend was Valva striking Thomas. "Are you alive?" she repeated. "That's not someone who cares if his child lives or dies," Kelly said, her voice still raised. A cheer and light clapping from the courtroom gallery could be heard after Supreme Court Justice William Condon, the presiding judge, denied the defense motion. That prompted a stern rebuke from the judge. Let me tell you what, I love the prosecution team. I wish I could see this in person. Man, I would love to see Carrie Ann Kelly in person. I guarantee you she's doing an amazing job to represent the state and Thomas in this whole thing. "Please refrain from any outbursts," Condon said. "Both sides here are entitled to a fair trial. I know it's emotional. We all do. An outburst like that in front of the jury could lead to a mistrial." Yeah, that's the last thing we want. Prosecutors over the past month have called more than 24 witnesses, school teachers, emergency responders, police officers, and medical professionals, and presented dozens of photographs as well as videos and text messages to the jury. The evidence detailed the last few years of Thomas's life, which prosecutors have said was marked by alleged starvation, beatings, and nights spent sleeping on the garage floor. What a horrible way to live your life as a child. You should be living this great childhood. You should be able to play with your friends, play with your siblings, go to school, and not have to worry that you're not getting fed, or you're getting beat by your parents. This poor child and his brother, they lived just such an awful life. It's horrific, you guys. It really is. The prosecution's final witness, former Suffolk County Medical Examiner Dr. Michael Kaplan, testified Wednesday that Thomas died on January 17, 2020 from hypothermia and also suffered organ damage that in 2 instances were caused by prolonged stress. Can you imagine stress for an 8-year-old? Hypothermia and stress. Something that should have been not even something that an 8-year-old should have to worry about at all. After the hearing, Valva's lead defense attorney, John Laturco, then called his second witness, Dr. Melina Kawaja, and I apologize, I'm sure I'm saying this poor lady's name incorrectly, an emergency medicine physician who testified that Thomas appeared to be in good health when he was examined by a physician's assistant at her urgent care center on May 29, 2019, about 8 months before Thomas's death. She's the owner and medical director of the Long Island Urgent Care Center in Manorville in West Babylon, said Valva and Polina brought Thomas to the Manorville facility because the boy had been vomiting for several days and began suffering from diarrhea the day of his examination. She cited records prepared by the physician's assistant and subpoenaed by the defense team that indicated Thomas's vital signs were normal. There were no bruises, rashes, or injuries apparent on Thomas's body, she testified, citing the records prepared by her employee. Thomas's eyes, ears, teeth, and gums appeared to be in good health, she said. He was ultimately diagnosed with strep throat and prescribed antibiotics, she said. Under cross-examination by Kelly, she acknowledged that she was not present for Thomas's May 29, 2019 exam and could not speak about Thomas's demeanor or his interactions with his father and Polina. So yeah, she's she's taken this information from an employee who saw him, and basically she can't speak, firsthand about how this little boy looked and appeared. She was just going off of these notes. Valva and Paulina did not tell the physician's assistant that Thomas had struggled with incontinence or that they forced the boy to wear pull-ups to school, she agreed. They did not inform the PA that Thomas was excessively hungry at school, denied access to the bathroom, and had been forced to sleep in a tent in the backyard or the garage, the witness also acknowledged. They also didn't tell the physician's assistant that Thomas had fallen down a flight of stairs about a month earlier, she agreed when asked by Kelly. The physician also said Valva and Paulina asked the physician's assistant for a return to school note that said Thomas should only be weighed by a pediatrician or urgent care staffer, which she called not standard practice. So there's the note that he didn't want the school to weigh Thomas, that Valva and Paulina did not want the school to weigh him. Remember, we mentioned that earlier on. East Mortridge Elementary School Principal Edward Schreiner testified earlier this month that Valva told him he didn't want school officials to weigh his sons and submitted a doctor's letter stating the boy's weight and weights were healthy. So there's the note. It came from an urgent care. And while urgent cares are great, don't get me wrong, a lot of you guys can agree, urgent care is not the same as going to see your regular doctor. These are doctors, nurse practitioners, physician assistants that are not used to seeing a particular patient. So they don't know a history necessarily. And, like if I go into an urgent care, for example, they don't know me from my regular doctor who sees me, a number of times during the year, and we have, regular conversations. So while that's great that they have an urgent care visit noted, there's not a lot of, good information there in my opinion. And so it looks like there is the doctor right there. All right, let me get it up back on Thomas here. Okay, so we've gotten ourselves up to today, which is Thursday. So I'll probably do another update this weekend. I do want to do some more diving into Paulina. That's going to be coming soon. I'll get us all caught up on anything else that I've missed this week in testimony this weekend. And we'll obviously, now the defense is up, we're going to see what crazy stuff they throw at us. They're throwing at this jury. So, again, we got to have justice for Tommy. This boy on the screen, he deserved every bit of justice, and I really hope that he gets it. I really do. So that's going to be it for today, guys. I appreciate you guys checking out the channel. If you haven't hit the like button yet and you like the content, I really appreciate if you hit that thumbs up on your way out. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I would also appreciate it if you would. You guys are awesome who subscribe and who check out the channel on the regular. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. And most of all, stay safe.